when recruiters work with a database that actually gives them data that is reliable, it builds trust. The ones who win in 2026 are going to be the ones that invest in data enrichment tools. Doesn't have to be PitchMe, it could be any other tool as well. A shift from the idea of storing candidates to continuously learn about them. Automation actually becomes a confidence layer. It makes their judgment faster. It makes them more informed as recruiters so that they can be the best version of themselves and do their job in the best way possible. One of the most interesting outcomes that we see is something clients aren't even mentioning as a goal or a challenge when we first initially talk to them. That is the recruiter mindset.
Ara, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me, Jason. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again. We spent quite a bit of time over in Las Vegas at the SIA Healthcare Summit, which was brilliant to be in person with so many other vendors and a lot of the staffing agencies. So good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
PitchMe and your role. Would love to just have you kind of share to the audience, what resonated with you when you joined PitchMe, and what do you do as a company? What problems do you solve, and perhaps how you're differentiated from others in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, more than happy to. So I'm leading the sales team right now here at PitchMe. I joined about just over 3 years ago. And as a company, we are doing data intelligence and data enrichment specifically for staffing. So most of our customers are staffing companies, recruitment companies, but we also do some work with in-house recruitment teams of large corporates as well. And what we're trying to do is change the way that recruiters and staffing companies use their database by keeping the database updated and clean and refreshed, relying on public data from the web, and keeping their database updated so that it's the single source of truth and the main place for their candidates to find information. And in terms of myself and my background, I was very new to the staffing industry when I joined. PitchMe was my first time working in staffing and recruitment in the HR tech space. But I'm always looking for tech that is either addressing an issue or doing something positive for society. And when I first spoke to Dina and the PitchMe team, their vision for changing the way that people hire really caught my attention, and that's what stood out when I was first looking for roles back then. So I wanted to learn a bit more about the industry and how it works, because it was very new to me, and I jumped in headfirst into a sales role. So that was great. I do have a background in sales as well, but definitely no experience in staffing or in recruitment. And sorry, we're going to ask something.
Yeah. No, I was just going to just go on from that in terms of, it is solving a massive problem for pretty much every staffing and recruiting agency out there in terms of, it's that data enrichment, it's that candidate sourcing. And I know you talk a lot about sort of skills-based as well. So question, what's one major flaw do you think that recruiters have in terms of assessing candidates, and how can they fix that in terms of their approach or their tooling to do that?
In terms of the biggest flaw, I think recruiters nowadays, they are assessing candidates based on static information, and that's usually in the form of a CV or a resume. But in reality, people are not static. People are dynamic and changing all the time. And the way that I see it is CVs feel like they freeze people in time. Whether that CV was taken 3 years ago, 5 years ago, it's a snapshot of that person at that moment of time. But people's skills, their motivations, the way that their career directions go, the industries that they work in, change constantly, like they did for myself. And to fix that, you need to you don't need to work harder. You need to work with enriched and updated data. And that's the whole point of PitchMe, trying to tell recruiters that, the way that you're doing things is not necessarily broken, but there is definitely a more efficient way of doing that. And they can make the recruiters themselves can make much better matches for the roles that they're working on almost instantly when they actually look at a candidate's current skills and their real signals rather than looking at a snapshot of something from the past.
And I'd imagine by having really truly enriched data, there's going to be opportunities also for sort of talent that maybe would be hiding if you're just pure CV or old data, or even maybe previous talent that was rejected by a different role type, and actually by having the enriched data, you can see that they've got upgraded skills or experience that might now fit a certain role. How do those sort of examples, do you see those often in terms of how clients get benefit from your services?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of the customers that we work with, traditionally they are used to just looking at candidates based on a job title or a company, and that also often leads to bias as well when they're used to working a certain way and looking for certain job titles and skills. But when they start to trust the data more, when they are provided with updated and enriched data based on skills and their interests and their intent, it allows them to have much deeper conversations because they can actually connect with the candidates and know what they are looking for in a much more meaningful way. And that helps them to have better conversations and build trust with those between the recruiters and candidates themselves. And we often see that a lot, where that trust is built only when, they're not just relying on a CV from a few years ago, where the candidate spends all their time correcting them and telling them everything that's changed since then and what's, how they're in a completely new industry and completely new skill and completely new job title because of, the fact that they've moved from project management to sales, or they've moved from, engineering to product management, or whatever it may be. So that always enables a lot more meaningful conversation.
And so a lot of this is, of course, automated in the background. So the recruiter gets the live information, in their CRM, ATS. I do often get the sense that recruiters kind of get a bit worried and scared of automation, right? If you've got enriched database and then the candidate sourcing can happen automatically. How do you kind of see the automation part helping recruiters do a better job versus kind of replacing them with AI and automation?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting topic that we talk about often, but I don't think we can talk about it enough, because automation only feels scary when it's built on bad data. Because then what it does is it exposes all your issues and it shows you everything that's wrong with your processes. But automation really shouldn't be scary, because it's not supposed to decide, who gets hired. It just decides where recruiters should focus their time. And recruiters of all people should be the least scared by automation, because clean data is going to remove all of the manual work that they hate, like chasing people for updates and guessing if someone is a fit for a role, or rescreening people that they've already spoken to. So those are all the things that we're trying to help recruiters to stop wasting their time on and do the things that they're great at, like having conversations and making placements. And I know some people talk about being scared of automation and AI as a joke, and others are quite serious about it. But it will never steal people's jobs, because automation can't do many things, like have great conversations and build trust and properly, truly assess if someone is a good fit. So instead of replacing recruiters, automation actually becomes a confidence layer. It makes their judgment faster. It makes them a lot more confident, and more importantly, it makes them more informed as recruiters, so that they can, be the best version of themselves and do their job in the best way possible.
Yeah, so it's very much about placement quality versus speed. Of course, yes, there is speed that helps, but it's actually distilling all of the candidate database and saying, right, these are the ideal candidates for you to spend time with, to have conversations with, to then increase your placement rate and quality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you see or hear from clients who have other kind of benefits or unexpected wins with PitchMe? Might be like reducing bias or even just increasing the candidate experience.
Yeah, that's a really great question because often people just talk about, how is it going to save me money or make me more revenue, which are all very
Yeah.
important conversations, especially in today's climate. But I think one of the most interesting outcomes that we see is something clients aren't even mentioning as a goal or a challenge when we first initially talk to them, and that is the recruiter mindset. So when recruiters work with a database that actually gives them data that is reliable, it builds trust and they start to trust that database. And that means they don't need to rely on the other tools that they're used to using. And that, that could be things like LinkedIn, it could be job boards, it could be other kind of AI or automation tools. And at first, that does take some guidance because naturally recruiters don't like changing the way they do things. But once they see how much easier their life becomes with clean data, that's when their database becomes the go-to place for their talent. And they eventually forget how reliant they used to be on those other tools
Mm.
like LinkedIn and job boards.
Mm. So I'm thinking if I put myself into the chair of an agency leader or owner, what signals, what is perhaps not working so well that I should be thinking about? Okay, this is a problem for me. My data's like a database is often not exactly an easy thing to scope out to understand if it's
Mm-hmm.
in a good place. Is it healthy? Is it enriched enough with best and breed data sourcing like PitchMe? Like where do I start? What do I do in terms of assessment and figuring out how to improve?
Well, I guess the first thing to understand is the quality of the data itself, because for business leaders and for business owners and recruitment leaders, their most valuable tool will always be their database. It doesn't matter, what kind of
Mm,
AI tool or automation tool they introduce, their database is going to be their most valuable asset, period.
yeah.
And what they need to do first is realize, you know, or understand what is the quality of that like currently in its state. Is it something that is, I'm making the absolute best that I can, or are there things that I can improve? And to do that, you really have to take a look at the data and see where there are gaps, to see how many of my uh, uh, candidates are actually outdated. When was the last time I spoke to these candidates? For example, if they
Mm,
filter by look at their database and filter by candidates who they have spoken to more than 2 years ago, for example, and that's
right.
80-90% of their database. That's a majority of the
Mm,
candidates in the database that they haven't even spoken with, which is understandable because it's difficult to maintain that many conversations and manually update that data. But really, they need to take a look at the quality of the database as it is now before they think about any other kind of tools or processes that they need to change. They really need to take a snapshot of their database and see what the health is, and then build up blocks from there of where they need to make changes and what else needs to be improved.
mm. Yeah, my mind here, Ara, is going, you're very practical actually in terms of I really think data and the quality of the data for an agency is just foundational. It feeds into, what we at Ringover do in terms of that communication, right? If you don't have the right phone numbers and other kind of contact points, how can you be effective with that outreach or even inbound, candidate experience? But also how it feeds automation, AI. So I guess my question here is, I'm curious how big of an opportunity is this if my data is not good, and how could I be thinking about the ROI in terms of a tool like or platform like PitchMe, and what's my life kind of before and after that transformation?
Um, yeah, great question. I think the most important thing, firstly, is to look at, like I said, how much of your data is actually updated. Because in reality, most of the customers and clients that we have, about 5 to 10% of the data is actually accurate. So if they have a database of
Wow.
100,000
Wow.
people, I mean, that's the
Yeah.
reaction we always get, but most of the time they know it as well. They just can't do
Yeah.
anything about it. But let's say if they have a database of 100,000 candidates, that means they're at most on a good day, they're tapping into 10,000 candidates in that whole talent pool. And the rest of that is just sitting there like dead
Mm.
weight. And what happens before is recruiters have this siloed and fragmented process where they look into their database for a candidate. Let's say they apply a filter for a, I don't know, sales manager with 3 years of experience based in London, maybe put some skills in there as well. And then they can't find the candidates they're looking for because, like I said, your database is only looking at 10% of that talent pool. And in that 10,000 talent pool example I gave, you probably only have maybe 50 to 100 candidates that fit that specific criteria. And even then, you go look at them and people have missing names or missing emails or missing job titles.
Mm.
So what happens is the recruiter says, why am I wasting my time with this? Let me just go on to LinkedIn. Then they go on to LinkedIn and find a person, let's say a Jane Smith, and they find that Jane Smith and then realize they don't have an email address for that person. So they then go on to either a job board or they go on to another tool like ZoomInfo or Apollo to find that person's contact details. So after you've gone through about 3 or 4 different tools, then you go back into your database and realize that Jane Smith was already sitting there all along, but it was, someone with a missing email or someone who hasn't been updated in 5 years. So you don't have the correct information and it was a completely
Mm.
different job title and company. But after you really looked in there and spent, an hour or two, that recruiter is now frustrated thinking, I could have had that candidate all along. It was in my database, but now I've used 4 or 5 different tools to find the same person. So that's something that completely changes from day one. When you start to use clean data, those recruiters will see that impact almost immediately because, like I said earlier, they will start to have those meaningful conversations. They don't have to
Mm.
waste time talking to the candidate about all of the things that have changed in the past 5 years. They rely on that clean and enriched data so that they can skip all of that unnecessary work and focus on the actual relationship building.
Yeah. Awesome. And if there's 2 or 3 other agencies, also bidding for that role, searching for that role, speed to candidate is critical. And Jane on LinkedIn, if you're getting Jane on LinkedIn, the other 2 or 3 are doing exactly the same. And so um,
But also importantly, it's not always just about speed as well. I mean, for a lot of people it is, but quality is also quite important because quality will really only improve when those automation tools you're using rely on clean data, not just volume.
mm,
If you automate
yes.
outreach or matching using outdated CVs, all you're doing is just moving faster in the wrong direction. But instead,
Mm,
if you're using clean and enriched data on real time skills and real time intent of that candidate, recruiters will start engaging people who are genuinely relevant and ready for a move, which is what leads to better placements and faster placements as well.
yeah. We're looking very close to the end of the year and start of 2026, which will be another interesting, I'm sure, challenging and hopefully opportunistic year. But yeah, a lot of agencies, I believe, need to be thinking differently,
Mhm.
acting differently. What's one thing you would kind of put out there in terms of challenging them to, just think about a different part of their business in a different way, perhaps?
Um, so to think about something that they need to do differently next year to stay competitive, I think they need to stop making decisions based on outdated data. That's ultimately the first
Mm-hmm.
step. Because if your automation and your matching and your outreach are all built on this, process of using old CVs and fragmented systems, all you're doing as a business is scaling inefficiently. It's not going to work. It's not sustainable. And the ones who win in 2026 are going to be the ones that invest in data enrichment tools. Doesn't have to be PitchMe, it could be any other tool as well. But that continuous visibility into their talent pools, rather than just doing more sourcing and paying for more tools, they really
Mm,
need to focus on what they already have and make that shift to be able to make placements, better placements and faster placements.
sure.
And finally,
Yeah.
one other thing I'll say is those who don't do that are going to be the ones who keep trying different tools and wonder why they're getting the same outcomes and what's going wrong.
Yeah, love that. Ara, yeah, we're coming up on time. Just did a quick check on the clock. A few quick fire questions to wrap up.
Go for it.
Is there a tool or a piece of technology or a feature you believe recruiters underuse today? It could be PitchMe related or just a broader industry application.
I would love to say PitchMe, which is absolutely true, but after PitchMe, I would say 100% it's their own database. It is literally the most valuable tool that they will ever have, but please, for the love of God, keep it updated.
There you go. Is there a hiring bias that you would love to see kind of eliminated out of talent and hiring?
Interesting. I've thought about this before. I would probably say job title bias, because I really think we overvalue job titles and we undervalue transferable skills, which are a much more accurate and better way of analyzing candidates and making placements.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. It doesn't really get spoken about enough. I really think that's a gem. Is there any podcasts or books or anything that you're kind of media-wise that you'd like to kind of share with the audience?
Good question. I'm more into audiobooks than books. I wish I had more time for reading, but I would say that podcast with Adam Grant, I think it's called Work Life. It's really great way of challenging how we think about people's potential and their performance and their skills.
Yeah, I've heard a few episodes with Adam, and he's a brilliant mind, brilliant way that he articulates a lot of great stuff. So I'll certainly
absolutely
dig out the details and put it in the show notes.
Amazing.
And final question: is there anything I should have asked you, or any kind of final wrap up points you wanted to share with us?
I think that's everything. I think the only thing I would say to recruitment leaders and company founders is to challenge and rethink the way that a candidate is being used once they obtain that person. A lot of business leaders that we speak to, they will get a candidate, put it into their database and think that's it, that person is mine now, it's sitting there. But we really urge them to shift from the idea of storing candidates to what we think is a much better way of using that data, is to continuously learn about them. And you can only do that by cleaning and updating your data. And that's when everything else makes sense. The matching, the automation, diversity, candidate experience, everything in between will start making sense once you shift from, taking candidates, storing them, dumping them into a database, to actually learning about them continuously throughout the year.
That's a fantastic mindset. I really want to put that front and center on when we promote this, because it's it's almost like it's not transactional. I'm not a number in your database. I'm not an object in your database. I'm a living person that will grow and develop, and how you get to know me and get to stay in touch with my developments is going to make me as a candidate feel seen and heard, and for an agency it's going to give you much more richness in terms of your database and your placement quality. So I love that.
Spot on. Now shout it from the rooftop so everyone else listens.
Brilliant. And then obviously we've got pitchme.co, which I'll put in the show notes. You and Dina are both on LinkedIn, I see often. So anywhere else we can find you?
Absolutely, drop me an email. You can always reach out to me. It's just Ara at pitchme.co.co. I'm always open to connecting with partners and customers and prospects and anyone who is just more interested in data and clean data. Not just someone who is interested in using PitchMe, but maybe somebody who is wants some advice or wants any opinions about the way that they're doing things without using something like PitchMe. There are many ways to clean and update your data and get the best out of your database. You don't have to use and pay for data enrichment tools, but it's a great place to start.
Awesome. Ara, it's been very cool to catch up, and thanks again for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jason. It was great to see you again, and hopefully keep in touch.
All right. Thanks, everyone.